It's the end of September and here we are again at Nick Fuljane's workshop near Brackley. The plan today is to show some more of the engine rebuild, and what we've got is all the parts cleaned up and where necessary any repairs done to items like the crankcase halves. We're going to look at putting a conrod onto the crankshaft. We're going to assemble the halves. We're going to look at the oil pump upgrades and some other details in the assembly, and then we'll look at the building up a cylinder head and some of the techniques involved in that. So the first thing we're going to do then is to look at the crankshaft.
Right, we've built up the crankshaft assembly. Prior to that, we've measured it all up. Everything was in tolerance. It's a very good crank. It's all on size nicely. We polished the journals. We've checked the conrods. We've blasted those up. Also, what we've done is resized the rods, which is just inside the journal size there. Checking the dimensions with the bore gauge, and then honing them just to take the. Sometimes you get a bit of chatter in between the bearing shell and the conrod, so we just hone those out and just resize those, just making sure they're all within manufacturer's tolerances, just ready for the build. Just a nice process to go through, really. Make sure everything's nice and clean and tidy and all within size. So we've left the last one on here. Here's one I prepared earlier system. Yeah. So we'll get the bearing in. So we've got the bearings all cleaned up and ready to roll. Just make sure, just inspect the back side of the bearing, just make sure there's nothing on there at all that's going to stand proud.
And you said we were quite lucky that we were able to reuse the old shell.
Well, this is something which, generally speaking, we don't normally do. If an engine comes apart, we always replace the parts. Now, judging by what we've seen here, this engine hasn't actually, or if it has been run, it's only been run for a very, very short period of time, because there's no bruising, there's no marks at all on the bearing surfaces. There's no chatter marks on the back of the face, which is what you'd normally see. So the bearings are as in new condition. So save yourself £300–400, and we'll reuse these bearings. And I can honestly say that these haven't run, so you know. There's no issue with that at all.
No, the client likes that.
We like that, yeah. It's good. That usually goes down quite well. Once again, making sure that everything is nice and clean. Slot the tag in to the conrod, push it down, and then just align it up. And do exactly the same. Make sure it's nice and clean. There's no bits of dirt or anything is resting on top of the faces. Just check your bearing out again. That's fine, there's no issues with those, all nice and clean, no chatter marks on the back or any sort of debris. Even when you get them new out of the packet, it's best to just give them a wipe off with your thumb and just see the slight bit of, I wouldn't use the word corrosion, but discoloration. You can just literally wipe it off so it's nice and clean. Yeah. And then refit it into the cap.
No, I notice you're not sort of putting a film of oil all over these things.
Well, you don't put oil on the back of the bearing surface, because that might cause a bit of standoff on the bearing to cap, which you don't want. Yeah. What we're after is just a bit of film of oil on the cap, film of oil on the rod. Just a small bit, because you've just put a reasonable amount on the cap and the rod, and that's all you need to do, really. Pop these together. Now these go on a certain way. What you're trying to achieve is, as the rod goes round, it obviously goes round in that direction, you want to basically put the thrust face put the thrust face on the which the direction the rod's thrust force is actually up against the blind part of the rod without a tag on. So basically put them on that way.
I mean, I don't know whether I was watching the camera or something, but just to explain that again, I didn't quite
grasp
that.
As it all goes round, as it all goes around, as the rod basically goes around, direction of rotation is that way.
Yeah.
So the forces are pushed into that. So as the forces basically come down from the piston being forced down,
right, yeah.
you're trying to. It's pointless having the tags there because it's off the thrust face.
Yeah.
Now, generally speaking, the bearing doesn't run on that part of the bearing anyway,
Yeah.
up against the journal. But it's a practice which you've always done with race engines, is always put the tags away from the thrust point or the thrust area
Yeah.
of the bearing journal. So that's basically just a rule of thumb which we always use.
So if this is the back of the engine, then we're talking sort of putting it on the left side.
That's right, direction rotation, or if the engine's sat on an engine stand, so it's sort of
Yeah.
number 1 and number 4 this way, direction rotation basically, and just pop it on that way.
Okay, no, I got you. Yeah.
Sorry, difficult to explain that one. It's, push them together, and then a bit of oil on the threads and on the face that the nut sits on.
Definitely not thread locking.
No.
Yeah.
Now, I know the Wayne Dempsey book says you're supposed to, but I've never done it in my life for building competition engines, and I've never had a blow up, and the factory don't recommend it either. So I'm sure the factory has spent millions on development, and there's a reason for not doing these things. I don't know. There's certain things that people sort of say, but I think most of it comes out of this Wayne Dempsey book of how to rebuild your engine.
Don't take this personally, Wayne.
It's nothing personal.
The book is great.
Everybody, yeah. What's the cop-out phrase? I can't remember now. So.
We accept no liability for any...
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Our views may not be the...
Yeah, exactly.
I can't remember what it is.
But actually, I found... 101 jobs for your Porsche 911 engine is actually quite a useful first line of reference.
There is, I found it. There's a few pages in there which actually are priceless. There's a lot of cross-referencing and dimensional referencing and things like that, and it's actually very useful in that respect. But there are some procedures in there which I don't agree with, but then that's only my opinion. So everybody else might have their own.
Well, I think that's what makes the world go round, really.
That's right. Yeah. Just do an initial nip up on these on the bolts, just so you're pulling the cap up tight.
Yeah.
And then basically just pull it into its torque. Try to do it in one sweep, because as soon as you stop moving, it takes an extra torque. Well, it's extra friction basically to get it moving again, and you can get a false torque reading. So when you're in your final sweep, trying to get it a minimum of 1/8 of a turn, so you just bring it in, and that should be a correct torque setting. So
just like that.
That's it. Easy as that. So yeah, that'll be ready now to put in. We've just got to check the nose bearing. Next stage we'll do is get the crankcase out and lay the pump assembly in there and build up the crankcase halves.
Okay, sounds good.